Good afternoon. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we're very pleased to be able to host for you this afternoon a webinar on the 2020 Safe Routes to School Funding Overview. Your presenter is going to be Caitlin Harley, who's the Program Manager for the Safe Routes to School program here at the Ohio DOT. And before I turn things over to Caitlin, I would like to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. During our webinar today, Caitlin's going to be stopping periodically to take questions that are submitted through the question section of your panel there from GoToWebinar. So whatever questions you have, please feel free to submit those. And when she stops to ask for those, I'll read them off to her. Also, we are attempting to record the webinar, and hopefully the technology works out. If it does, then we'll post the recording and send a link out to that. But if nothing else, we will at a minimum send out a PDF copy of today's slideshows presentation to you. So with that, I believe those are all of the housekeeping items I had. Caitlin, are you ready?
Ready. Thanks, Victoria.
All yours.
Okay, great. Thanks. So again, my name is Caitlin Harley. I'm with the Safe Routes to School and Active Transportation Program Manager here at ODOT. As you are all probably aware, since you're on this webinar, ODOT sets aside about $4 million annually for its Safe Routes to School program, most of which is awarded to local partners for the implementation of projects impacting the ability of students to walk and bike to school safely. Victoria?
Getting quite a bit of feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I'm looking here to see if... I'm not really sure.
It's us. So I'm good to go. You can hear me, Victoria?
Yeah, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, yay, we still have 87 people. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so this is what we're covering today, Safe Routes to School program. I'm going to talk specifically about program funding eligibility and then go into detail about the 2020 application process, everything about that, as well as close out just with some of our general resources. So to start off, just wanted to share with you, of course, the goal of our Safe Routes to School program in general. This goal really drives our program, what's eligible, how we score projects, and so on. So really, our Safe Routes to School program provides funding to facilitate the development and implementation of projects and activities that enable and encourage children to walk and bike to school. So that's what our goals are really related to, is enabling and encouraging children to walk and bike to school. What's unique about the Safe Routes to School program is that we can provide funding for infrastructure projects, so that's the engineering side of things, as well as non-infrastructure projects. So for activities related to education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. And what we know is that having a comprehensive approach like this is really how we can have the biggest impact on enabling and encouraging kids to walk and bike to school. So wanted to talk specifically about funding eligibility. So when we are looking at ways for particular projects to be eligible for Safe Routes to School funding specifically, there's really three things that we're looking at, three unique things. So the first is that projects should be priorities that are identified in a plan. This can be a school travel plan, which I'll talk a little bit more in depth later, but it can also be in another kind of active transportation plan that your community might have, a bicycle plan, a pedestrian plan, some sort of equivalent plan, mostly just wanting to know that these priorities are coming out of a process where you've engaged stakeholders and addressed needs and concerns and stuff like that. We want these plans to be updated within 5 years, so just looking to make sure that those plans have any sort of important updates over the past 5 years. If you have any major changes in your communities, if your schools have changed locations, if you have new partners that you're working with, or potentially if you have implemented certain projects, just making notes of that and how it might impact other priorities that you're now moving on to. We also look to have student and crash 2-mile radius maps developed, and I'll show you some examples of that at the end of this as well. This is just something we like to do early on in the process to understand where students live in conjunction with your schools. Make sure that a majority of students live within 2 miles, which we consider to be walkable and bikeable for that age range. And then also have some awareness of where we're seeing any bicycle or pedestrian related crashes around schools as well. So these maps, ODOT is happy to help you develop these maps as well, as some regional planning organizations have provided some support in this way. What we need from you in order to make those maps is your student address information, and I'll touch on that at the end as well. The third aspect is the 2 surveys that we have related to safe routes to school, one of which is a parent survey, so understanding what are parents' major concerns, what are their thoughts in general about walking and biking to school, to make sure that we are developing priorities that are going to help address those concerns. And then student travel tallies. These are the tallies that happen in classrooms by teachers to understand current rates of walking and biking to school. So we house these on ODOT's website and help collect that information. In relationship to number 1, just wanted to mention that you can definitely reach out to your district Safe Routes to School coordinator if you're thinking about a plan, you want to make sure you're good to move forward on developing a Safe Routes to School application, kind of using priorities from that plan, just to check in, make sure you're good to go with that. So in terms of the actual application itself, the applications are going to be online. We use FormStack, which is a website to collect our application information. The application window, it'll open on January 6th, and then it'll close down at 5 p.m. on March 6th. And all of the information that I'm going to share about this application is all included within this 2020 application guidance, which is just the image on the slide. And all of our Safe Routes to School information is housed at walk.ohio.gov, which is the footer of this slide. So for all the details related to the application, logistics, that is all included within that document. Communities can apply for infrastructure funding or non-infrastructure funding or both, as well as for school travel plan development assistance if that is needed. And then just general timeline, we typically invite applicants to present a little bit more about their projects around April, and then we aim to provide a notice of awards by the end of June. And while the application is not open yet, it's going to open January 6th, I have included an appendix within this 2020 application guidance where you can see all of the questions and attachments that will be included in the application. So feel free to check that out and start thinking about your applications. Okay. Any questions so far, Victoria, before I dive in a little bit more?
No, none right now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, great. So now I'm going to talk specifically about each of the different applications. So our infrastructure application is where you will submit for infrastructure-related projects. These are projects within 2 miles of schools that include kids in grades K through 8. So infrastructure projects are capped at $400,000. And then just some examples for infrastructure would be sidewalks, on-street separated bicycle facilities, shared use paths, enhanced crossings like high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian countdown timers, curb bump outs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, pedestrian hybrid beacons, just some examples of what you might be using infrastructure funding for. Communities, can get creative with this. You might bundle together a lot of low-cost projects. You might want to do high visibility crosswalks on many, many priority intersections, or maybe you want to do one sort of more focused project, one segment of sidewalk or intersection or something like that. So there's definitely flexibility in sort of meeting your needs. And with the goal of enabling safe walking and biking for children, we're really emphasizing the implementation of those more comfortable facilities for that K through 8 age range. So being more focused on facilities that are going to separate people from traffic, whether that's sidewalks, paths, or on street separated bikeways. So a few more details with our infrastructure application. We are looking at construction funding for either fiscal year 23 or 24 that you can apply for, and you'll just let us know which fiscal year you're looking for that funding. Project sponsors, so the people who are applying for infrastructure are those local jurisdictions with the appropriate maintenance authority. So whether you're the city, village, township, or county, whoever has that maintenance authority over where the infrastructure is going to be, the people who would ultimately maintain it. The other thing that is unique about Safe Routes to School funding is that we have the ability to reimburse for up to 100% of eligible costs. So for communities that need it the most, we're able to fund these projects at 100%. And we are also able to fund all phases of project development if needed, from the preliminary engineering, design, right-of-way, construction engineering throughout the whole thing. Do note that the project cap, so the $400,000 cap, is the cap for all phases. So if you are looking to incorporate more phases than just construction, that would be part of that $400,000 cap. And this is all reimbursable funding that's available. Also wanted to just touch on the scoring side of things. So as we look to score projects and provide funding, things that we're looking at, things that are really important to us are definitely connectivity, making sure that this project is building a more complete network for walking and biking to school. Safety, we're seeing that the project will improve safety. So these are two really huge pieces of our scoring rubric, which you'll see in the guidance. We also look at need, so demonstrating that there's a high need based on free and reduced lunch, as well as reliance on walking and biking for transportation. We also look at trips, demonstrating that kids are within walking or biking distance, and we could realistically enable or encourage them to walk or bike to school in the future. So that's where we look at our 2-mile radius maps. And then community commitment. This is really important as well, just demonstrating the ability to implement projects, that there's support from key partners on implementing this project and other Safe Routes to School related activities. So these 5 things really make up the bulk of our scoring for projects. There's other considerations as well. We work with a committee of a lot of different people to talk through feasibility, make sure cost estimates are accurate and appropriate, as well. So then as you're looking through the infrastructure application, you'll notice that there are several required attachments. So just wanted to briefly provide some information on that. And you'll be able to attach these to the application, but you won't be able to save attachments to the application and then exit out and come back in and do it again. So you should work to pull these attachments together and to upload them when you're ready to submit your application. So these are pretty clear, but we want you to identify where in your plan you've identified this project. So you can upload your school travel plan, you can just upload an action plan or some piece or part of your planning document that lets us know that. For communities that have a regional planning organization, we'd like a letter of support from them. A project countermeasure map, this is just helping us understand where your project is and what it is. This can be as simple as a screenshot of Google Maps with some indication of what your project is and a key. A certified cost estimate, so this would let us know about which phases you're requesting funds, and it needs to include things like contingency and inflation. We are also, this is a new attachment this year, asking for a budget breakdown. So this is just a simple document where you can let us know which project phase you're looking for funds. which fiscal year, and let us know if there's any other contributions going into that. So if you are, maybe if your community has done the design for a project, but you're looking for construction funding, that's your way to sort of let us know what's been done and then what you're requesting for construction in fiscal year 23. And I have an example of that in the guidance as well. You'll upload the 2-mile student and crash map. We like to see a proof of progress. So this could be one of many things. This could be just something that's indicating to us that you are working on implementing your plan, on implementing safe routes to school activities. Potentially it's a photo of a steering committee that's working on this, or some meeting notes, or perhaps you've worked with your school on adopting policy to make sure kids can walk or bike to school, any sort of just indication of progress that you can share with us. And then a signed ordinance as well, which we have examples of online. Okay, I'll pause there, Victoria. Any questions so far with infrastructure?
Yes, there are some. The first question is from Kate Manning, and she said, are tallies/surveys necessary for STP development applications before the application round?
No, I will talk about school travel plan development in a moment, but part of that will be including student address data so that we can develop that, or if your community has already developed those maps, you could just include that. And I will touch on that when we get to school travel plans.
Sounds good. The next question is from Michael Miller, and he said, is the $400,000 project cap for infrastructure projects the total project cost limit or the maximum funding available for any single project?
Total project cost. Can you say that again?
Sure. Is the $400,000 project cap for infrastructure projects the total project cost limit or the maximum funding available for any single project?
Okay, gotcha. I believe that, so your project may cost more than $400,000, but $400,000 is the max that Safe Routes to School will contribute to that project. I think that answers the question. If not, I will follow up on that.
Great. Another question is, can infrastructure and/or non-infrastructure funds be used for demonstration projects related to the existing school travel plan or connections between CMs in the plan and other local projects?
What was that last part, or connections between?
CMs, like the letter C and the letter M, in the plan and other local projects.
Okay. Good question.
We can come back to it if you want.
Yeah. Yes, this is possible. I will follow up on whether that would be infrastructure or non-infrastructure.
Okay, and then our last question for right now is, if updating school travel plans, do you need new ordinances or a new letter of support?
No.
And we did get a clarification on CM. They meant to mean countermeasures.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Good to know.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. And feel free to continue to submit questions related to infrastructure, but I will move on to non-infrastructure for now. So our non-infrastructure projects are activities to improve safety or encourage walking and biking to school, such as education, encouragement, enforcement, or evaluation. This funding is intended to develop and implement projects that are sustainable past funding availability, and the project cap for non-infrastructure is $60,000. So some examples of this could be developing a walking school bus program, walking Wednesday program, facilitating bike rodeos, purchasing crossing guard program supplies, or developing and marketing driver safety education campaigns. Funding does depend on the number of schools. So for communities working with 1 to 10 schools, the project cap is $20,000. 11 to 25 schools is $40,000, and then 26 and up is the full $60,000. For non-infrastructure funding, funding is available in fiscal year 21. Project sponsors can be political subdivisions, so a little bit broader with city, villages, townships, counties, school districts themselves, as well as health districts. Again, ODOT can reimburse up to 100% of eligible costs for people who demonstrate the need. And then funding is really intended to develop and implement plans, programs, policies, and environments that are sustainable past the availability of Safe Routes to School funding. So getting programs started as opposed to funding reoccurring costs, which I'll talk a little bit about with ineligible costs. And scoring for this is very similar, so still making sure that projects are going to be, filling gaps for kids, from an education, encouragement, enforcement, or evaluation side of things, that projects are going to improve safety, that communities demonstrate a high need, that communities demonstrate the ability to impact trips, and then again, looking for that community commitment, demonstrating the capacity to implement and sustain these projects and other Safe Routes to School related activities. These are the attachments. Again, this is outlined in that appendix in the application guidance, but we are just, again, looking to see that this is included within a plan. There is a detailed budget that just lets us know what you plan to spend the funding on, whether that's personnel or supplies, materials, stuff like that in a budget, the 2-mile maps, similar proof of progress, and wanted to mention that the proof of progress could be infrastructure related and it could be non-infrastructure related for either of these applications. So we aren't just looking for non-infrastructure progress in your non-infrastructure application. It's just any sort of Safe Routes to School related progress. If the applicant is not the school, we would like to see a letter of support from the school district that you plan on engaging with, and then the signed ordinance. Okay, so wanted to touch briefly, I've also included some information on eligible and ineligible activities within the 2020 guidance. So just in general, projects that do not specifically relate to the goal of enabling or encouraging walking and biking to school are not eligible. This might include things like improvements to bus stops, education programs that are primarily focused on bus safety, or projects that reorganize pickup and drop off primarily for the convenience of drivers. We're also not able to fund food or beverage or food and beverage gift cards. We're not able to provide funding for bicycles, whether those are giveaways or whether those would be utilized in trainings. We're not able to provide funding for giveaways that don't have any sort of safety or educational value to them. So just listed a couple examples, and there could definitely be opportunities to include safety-related elements or educational-related elements, but any giveaways that don't have either of those would be ineligible. We're also not able to fund reoccurring costs. So just an example, a couple examples of this would be crossing guard salaries. So while we can provide funding for training and program supplies needed for crossing guards, we aren't able to provide ongoing funding for crossing guard salaries for continuous years. And then along the same lines, reoccurring costs for a program coordinator would be ineligible for 100% funding. So after a year of funding, the applicant would have to demonstrate in their application how they plan to leverage local investment to sustain their Safe Routes to School work in the future. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is for projects whose only purpose is to upgrade curb ramps to be ADA compliant. These are also not eligible for Safe Routes to School funding. That's not to say that ADA upgrades could certainly be part of your Safe Routes to School infrastructure application, and in many cases they are, as you might be building sidewalks or improving intersections, and all of that would be required to be ADA compliant. But just for projects whose only purpose would be to upgrade those would be ineligible. Okay, I'm going to pause there, Victoria.
We have more questions. Is funding limited to public schools, or can projects be funded for private schools as well? How or where is school defined?
Okay, good question. So the limitation that exists is we won't be providing funding to private entities. So private schools can certainly be involved in Safe Routes to School programs, and in many cases should be involved in development of school travel plans as part of that comprehensive approach. And it might even be possible, it is possible for funding to impact private schools specifically. The limitation is that the funding would not go to a private school directly, and if we funded any infrastructure that was on private property, it would have to be open to the public 24/7 for the length of its life. So it may require some additional MOUs. There might need to be a donation of property to a municipality who will be able to maintain it, or something similar. Keep in mind that private schools are not excluded from the Safe Routes to School program, but just in general, as we went through the scoring and sort of what's being prioritized, that stays the same for all different schools. So in some communities, if private schools are more of a magnet school, it may not be as competitive of an application, just depending on those characteristics, not necessarily because it's private or public, if that makes sense.
Okay, next question. Some school districts are reluctant to give out student addresses. How do we address that?
That's a good question. That might be something we have to work together on. If that's an issue, I would definitely chat with your district coordinator about that, and we can see if there are some other data sources we might be able to use, or if we can work together to see how we can figure something out. Good question.
Next question. For giveaways, what about high-vis reflective gear? Would that be eligible by improving safety for walkers and bikers?
Yes.
Okay, last question for right now is, can you submit an application for Safe Routes to School 2020 if you received funding last year?
Yes. Yeah, and good question. Okay, ready, Victoria?
I'm ready.
Okay. So the last piece I wanted to talk about is school travel plan development assistance. So we do have some assistance available for communities, schools, and their partners to develop school travel plans if they don't have the resources or capacity to do so themselves. So communities can request consultant assistance for their jurisdiction or school to develop a plan. So we would not be reimbursing anyone. We would just be providing consultant assistance. Or we could provide reimbursement to a locally selected consultant. So it'd still be reimbursement. It would still be consultant that would be helping you develop a school travel plan following our guidelines. We definitely recommend looking at ways you can maximize this assistance in terms of including multiple schools and just really building as comprehensive of a plan as possible. I just wanted to reiterate here, just remember that if your community does have some sort of active transportation or bicycle or pedestrian plan, you can use it. So there's no need to develop a school travel plan if you feel like you have a planning process that's identified good projects that would impact kids walking and biking to school. But you would have to have your 2-mile radius maps developed, and then you would have to also supplement that plan with the parent survey data as well as student travel tallies. And really similar scoring. So again, looking to demonstrate that a school travel plan will help you address gaps or opportunities for connecting students to school, that it will help improve safety, that you demonstrate a high need, that you demonstrate the ability for trips to be taken walking and biking, and then a really big emphasis on community commitment, just really demonstrating that you have the right partners in place to, help bring this plan along, make sure that the players that are involved in the plan are going to be able to help with implementation, because, this is a plan that the local community and school will be owning, implementing, and updating. And in our scoring, there's a really big emphasis you'll see in the scoring on demonstrating that need, as well as that potential trips. So as you look through the application, sorry, there's an error on this slide that should say school travel plan applications will require. There's a possibility that you need to include a cost estimate if you are applying for reimbursement funding. If you are applying for consultant assistance, then you won't need to include a budget, which is why that's in brackets. One of the things you'll submit to us is the % free and reduced lunch spreadsheet for your schools. And then this is where you'll attach the student address data, or if you already have developed a 2-mile student crash map, you could update that as well. If you're part of a regional planning organization, we ask for a letter of support from them, and then we'll also have a signed ordinance for that as well. Okay, Victoria, any other questions before I kind of cover the major resources?
One more that's come into the chat pod. For school travel plan development, does funding awarded for reimbursement for a consultant need to be subbed to a planning/engineering company, or can funds be awarded to agencies/partners that can adequately conduct the work?
I see. Funds for local reimbursement would go to the applicant, so the jurisdiction or the school, to reimburse a local consultant only.
And we can follow up after the presentation too with the questions and written responses.
Yes,
and one more question that came in the chat pod is, will the presentation be available for download when it's complete? Stephen, we are trying to record it, so if we're successful, we'll post that, probably less the little silence piece at the beginning where we had the issue, but the PowerPoint as well is going to be shared. So at a minimum, you'll get the PowerPoint, but hopefully you'll also get a recording to go with it. All right, Kate, that's all yours now. Thanks.
Okay, great. So a few more minutes of presentation, and then we'll have more time for questions. Just wanted to give a quick overview of the major Safe Routes to School resources that are available. So all of this information is really housed at walk.ohio.gov. The application itself and the application guidance that I've been talking a lot about is located specifically on the Apply for Funding page. And then everything else that I'm about to talk through now is on the Develop Your Safe Routes to School page. So this is a little bit more of the development side, but just wanted to make sure you're aware of kind of the flagship resources. So we have our school travel plan guidelines as well as a template for those of you developing these yourselves. We also have free workshops available through our Active Transportation Academy, where you can request trainings on developing school travel plans or active transportation plans. This is what these guidelines look like for school travel plans. We have ones developed for communities as well as for consultants that are working with communities on these plans. We have, as I mentioned, our template. So this is a Word document you can download, you can populate with information. It's easy to update since it's in Word. And then as you're looking at countermeasures, we have a non-infrastructure toolkit and an infrastructure toolkit that really lay out a lot of the different ideas for countermeasures appropriate for safe routes to school. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty good list. And I've also included some other really good resources and websites in the application guidance document as well. There's also information related to the update process. So kind of what that looks like, what you should keep an eye out for as you hit that 5-year mark with some of your plans and you want to make sure you're doing some updates. And then at a broader level, we also have our active transportation plan guidelines for communities. And then, as you know, you can apply for school travel plan assistance through the Safe Routes to School application as well. And then a couple visuals. So we've talked a few times about the Safe Routes to School 2-mile radius maps. So this is an example of what that map looks like when we've developed it. You can see the different radiuses from the school. You can see where students live, and then you can also see bicycle crashes. You can tell if they're fatal or not fatal, and pedestrian crashes, again, fatal or not fatal. So these bar charts at the bottom just help you be able to easily calculate how many crashes are within 2 miles, as well as what percentage of your total enrollment lives within 2 miles. So all this information, again, is online, but when you submit your student address data to us, we have to know the school that your student goes to, the grade of the student, the address, including the city and the zip code, but we cannot accept anything with student names on it. We also we cannot accept it in PDF form. So we generally like Excel, CSV. And then just wanted to give you an image of where the surveys are located. So again, on that Develop Your Safe Routes to School page, there's a web page for the surveys, and this is where parents will actually click on surveys, and they'll drop down and click on their school, and that's where they'll take the parent surveys. So we collect this data. ODOT collects this data on the back end, and we can provide an aggregate report to you on responses. Same thing for the student travel tallies. So these are taken by teachers. They're able to put in their information there as well. So for those of you who are going to promote using these surveys, you should first make sure that your school is listed on the drop-down, and if not, let me know and I'll add it. And then I just wanted to also make a comment too for just of all the other types of project funding available as well. So for those of you looking to fund bicycle and pedestrian projects, I've covered several types of projects that we fund with Safe Routes to School and sort of what makes you eligible for Safe Routes to School, what we're prioritizing with the Safe Routes to School program. But there's a lot of different funding available for bicycle and pedestrian projects beyond Safe Routes to School, notably our Highway Safety Improvement Program for projects that are directly related to improving safety. We have our Transportation Alternatives Program, which ODOT provides funding to areas outside of MPOs, and then we also provide funding through our MPO and Large Cities Program. There's a couple programs within ODNR, Recreational Trails, as well as Clean Ohio Trails Fund, for those of you who might be looking at trails projects that might impact schools, as well as Ohio Public Works Commission. So I would definitely encourage you, just in general, as you're working on plan implementation of any kind, to check out our ODOT Program Resource Guide. I've included a link to that on the website as well. Okay, so next steps. For those of you interested in applying for Safe Routes to School funding next year, definitely reach out to your district Safe Routes to School coordinator. Talk with them about your plan. Talk with them about the projects that you're thinking about. They're definitely good resources, can help point you in the right direction. They can help review your draft applications and let you know if there's any immediate feedback. make sure your cost estimates, look right, look appropriate, have the right stuff, be able to point you towards some of those resources you might want to look at. Definitely encourage you to review the 2020 application guidance, which is available online, and then apply between January 6th and March 6th. Here's a map and list of the ODOT District Safe Routes to School coordinators. This information is online. It's in the application guide as well. But these are your people, so reach out to them. They're really excited to talk with you about your plans, your projects, and make sure that you're getting off on the right foot as you develop your Safe Routes to School applications. And you can always contact me as well. I hope to be a resource to you guys across the state as well. All right, Victoria, let's do the questions.
We've got some more. What is the deadline for requesting ODOT's assistance in mapping crash and student addresses?
Oops, sorry, can you repeat the first part?
Sure. What is the deadline for requesting ODOT's assistance in mapping crash and student addresses?
Good question. I would say in general, the sooner the better. I would say I would highly recommend, if you want to include that in your application, to get it to us the first, probably the first week of February. But I mean, feel free to reach out at any time, but the sooner the better, obviously.
Yep. Okay. Does the locally selected consultant assisting to develop the school travel plan have to be ODOT pre-qualified?
Have to be ODOT pre-qualified. I'll follow up on that answer.
So they can look for that answer on the question answer document we're going to send out.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Next question is, will ODOT develop the map?
The 2-mile map?
Yes, I'm taking it that's what they meant.
Correct, yes. As long as communities are able to send us the student data in the form that we've requested, we can develop the maps, yes.
Now there's a follow-up question. It says, as long as the map addresses this information, can they be locally generated?
Absolutely. Yeah, we just want some of that basic information. If there is a way for you to do the mapping or additional things you want to include in the map, you can absolutely do that.
Okay, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. We have a question about surveys. Parent surveys were completed in the school district we are working with on an application, but we did them on paper. Do they need to be submitted online? Same thing for teacher tallies.
As long as you can aggregate the information and be able to share what the major parent concerns are, as well as be able to talk about the current rate of walking and biking to school, that's really the ultimate goal. So you're welcome to put those in yourself online if you want, and I can run the report for you and do some analysis. But if there's another way that you're able to take that information and turn it into some key findings, that's really the goal.
Okay, we're back to the maps. Is there a way to document students within 2 miles without the specific addresses? Have parents cited privacy regarding distribution of information regarding students' specific addresses?
Mm-hmm. I think that's something we'll have to talk about one-on-one. I mean, in general, we've worked with a lot of agencies, a lot of school districts, and gotten a lot of this data. We absolutely don't want any personal information related to people's names. So we'll just have to talk on a case-by-case basis with that. So just definitely reach out to your district coordinator to start that conversation.
All right, and then the next question is, could an MPO or an RTPO be an applicant to receive Safe Routes to School funding to develop school travel plans or active transportation plans for schools or school districts in their planning area?
No, they're not eligible for for Safe Routes to School application funding. No.
And the last question I have right now is, does ODOT provide the crash data?
We do. The crash data is available to all public entities on our GIS crash analysis tool, which we call GCAT. So for folks who want to develop those maps themselves, you have the ability to access that data. You can search for bicycle and pedestrian crashes in your area. You can select data and you can export it into a shapefile, into an Excel file or a geodatabase. So there's definitely the ability for public agencies to access the data without ODOT. But for those of you who are wanting us to develop the maps for you and sending us your student address data, we will generate the crash data in those maps.
And Kate, I'm going to put in a shameless plug here. Next Wednesday, we have a webinar from 10 to 11 a.m. and it is on how to use our GCAT system. So I can send a link out to everybody who's on the webinar today in case you're interested in learning more about GCAT and how it can be used, or at a minimum, what type of data you can request out of it. I think that's all the questions we have in the chat or the question pod for right now. And there's no comments that have come in through the chat pod. So thank you so much for this presentation. I know we have a lot of folks really excited about the upcoming application period, and they're hoping to be able to provide you a really wonderful batch of applications so you'll have an incredibly hard time making choices. So
yes, we're very excited. Thanks so much for everyone for tuning in. Don't hesitate to reach out for questions. I'm going to work with Victoria to make sure that we get all the Q&A documented so that you can follow up and anybody can follow up on the questions and answers that we went through today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who attended. We'll go ahead and end the webinar now. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them to Kate, or you can always email them into the LTAP box and we'll send them along to Kate. Everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.